newspapers headlined a story of the international need for action. And the world soon learned how the military forces available to the United Nations responded to this call to arms. The call was for speedy action, and among those who met this call was your Air Force. Within a few hours after hostilities broke out, transport planes of every size and description were busily engaged in evacuating civilian personnel from threatened cities of South Korea. These were people from all walks of life, made fugitives overnight from their homes and places of business. Yes, these were innocent people, saved from a rising tide of destruction by prompt Air Force action. Despite the urgency and the speed with which the Air Force planes and their crews were alerted for service in the emergency, they did not depart for Korea empty-handed. Supplies for air and ground troops were packed into every type of aircraft that could carry cargo. Top Air Force and Army officials boarded Korean-bound flights to see conditions at first hand. Conferences with commanders in the field quickly determined the amount and type of Air Force personnel, equipment, and services that would be immediately needed. The most general requirement was for widespread airlift facilities. Airlift for the Army, their troops and supplies, because military action in Korea was a fight against time. Airlift for the Marines, who supplied striking forces which had to be flown to their jump-off points. Airlift for scores of mercy missions, mainly air evacuation of the wounded. Yes, and airlift for vital supplies, particularly weapons and ammunition, needed so desperately by the men fighting a delaying action in the front line. Once again, the Air Force found itself engaged in an airlift, a huge aerial supply service which rivaled the famous Berlin airlift in size, urgency, distances to be bridged, and tonnages carried. And once again, the Air Force found itself confronted with taking over bombed-out airfields, wrecked by enemy action. Airfields which had to be repaired by any means at hand. And in Korea, any means at hand meant primitive means, basic materials, strong backs, and workers who made up for their lack of modern airstrip construction equipment by toiling longer hours just to help the American Eagles fly again. And fly they did. From Air Force bases in Japan, F-80 shooting stars were groomed for their mission of establishing air superiority. Wing tanks were filled to the brim to give more time in the air, time for strafing targets of opportunity, and time to meet the North Korean yaks and blast them out of the sky. Meanwhile, bombers were assigned to fly deep into aggressor territory, to destroy key roads, bridges, military installations, and industrial targets. And there could be no waiting for weather. Missions were accomplished when not only the targets, but even the falling bombs themselves disappeared in the murky overcast, aimed by precision radar. Careful briefings were the order of the day, particularly for pilots of the liaison planes. These light, slow-flying planes spotted enemy positions and relayed accurate target information to our artillery forces on the ground. Crews assigned to psychological warfare missions were put to work loading planes with pamphlets and safe conduct passes. A veritable blizzard of printed matter clouded the skies to bring the misguided and misinformed North Koreans the truth about the United Nations action. Further, the leaflets guaranteed humane treatment to any North Korean desiring to cease fighting. Air superiority over Korea having been gained by our jet planes, the United States Air Force brought out of mothballs a large number of F-51 Mustang fighters to give ground troops additional air support. In making delivery to the war front, one Navy carrier transported the largest number of aircraft ever to be carried aboard a flat top and sliced 3 days from the existing record for crossing the Pacific. At major Korean and Japanese airports from which fighters and bombers flew missions against North Korean targets, maintenance crews were swinging into round-the-clock operation. All types of aircraft were serviced and kept ready to fly those missions assigned to the United States Air Force. Once again, mechanics took brush in hand and dipped into the paint pot. As fast as the B-29s arrived, American individuality left its mark. The Mustangs were given the job of supplying close support to the ground forces. They searched the terrain for immediate tactical targets, diving to low altitudes to knock out marshalling yards and supply trucks behind enemy lines. Actual strikes were recorded by gun sight aiming point cameras as the pilots made their run on the target. At the outset of air action in Korea, F-80 fighters were given the task of establishing air superiority. This mission accomplished, these flashing shooting stars were readied for another use. For the first time, they were put to test at low levels in direct support of ground forces. Targets heretofore assigned exclusively to Mustangs were taken over by jets as well. In a total of 23,000 sorties, the combined fighter effort accounted for 376 bridges downed or... Over 500 trucks and vehicles destroyed or damaged. $874 warehouses damaged or leveled. 376 field guns silenced. 22 oil tanks destroyed or damaged. 1,059 tanks crippled or destroyed. $33 marshalling yards destroyed. 874 railroad cars destroyed or damaged, and 33 tunnels sealed. At advanced bases, another part of the air team groomed the B-26 medium bombers. Crews fueled and armed the double-duty invaders for bombing and strafing missions against North Koreans. These bombers helped deliver a good share of the 30,000 tons of bombs consigned to enemy targets. The usefulness of the B-26 squadrons was pointed up by their ability to bomb strategic targets from high altitudes and then drop down to strafe tactical targets on the return trip, sometimes through anti-aircraft fire. At the end of a 7,000-mile supply line, the B-29 Superforts loaded bombs for major airstrikes. Last-minute preparations made certain that lethal cargoes were stowed properly in the bomb bays. Remote-controlled gun turrets were loaded and tested. Members of the crews awaited takeoff time with a confidence that reflected their training. Their calm attitude was a result of thorough briefings and detailed preparation. From here on out, the missions were routine. Taxi out. Takeoff. And then the swing into formation, every crew member at his station. And when the targets were sighted, it was bombs away. The results speak for themselves. Bombing as accurate as modern radar, precision bomb sights, and trained bombing crews could make it. Korea is typical of your Air Force in action. It doesn't matter what the job, whether it's bringing the wounded from the battlefront or transporting vital equipment to our friends and our troops, or moving the ground forces to critical fighting fronts. Your Air Force moves into action swiftly and efficiently and stays in action until its job is done.